there's a couple things we're going to do today. One, I'm going to do a relatively short lecture. I feel like somehow this is stuff I've been implying but not directly showing. And hopefully this will be helpful today. Is that recording? It is. And we're going to be using Bucky. This is actually a character I did a long time ago. And it's a pretty simple rig, very similar to my carrot rig. Almost all made up of deformers. So as you can see, and check them out there. So he's got a lot of deformers on him, right? You got this to be able to warp them around. He's got some arms and arm pegs to be able to get however we need them. I don't have anything really going on his head other than rotation on a head peg here. Got a little bit of deformation on his ears if we wanted to get a little bit of bounce to something like that. So mostly though, he's a spine deformation, an arm deformation, and and something for the legs. So arms, legs, spine, and a little bit of wiggle on the ears. So we're going to look at him in just a second. Just a quick overview of what we're going to go over today. There, what I hope to cover is just I'm going to talk about animating with him. I'm maybe going to set a few poses, but I'm not going to do a whole animation today. This is more of a conceptual thing. Because one of the things that was kind of coming up when we were talking the other day was how do you get strong poses? How do you pose a rig? Like what are some ways of working with a rig? And I thought this is something that I think some of you are kind of doing intuitively. Some of you maybe have thought about doing, and some maybe you haven't. Maybe this is just something that isn't a clear way of working with a rig for you. The other thing is I think some of you are possibly not wanting to use rigs at all, and that's absolutely fine. I am not going to micromanage any of that stuff anymore. Like starting today, the rest of the class starts becoming a lot more about what you want to create. And that's the other part of what we're going to go over today, because I'd like to get started on sort of a little mini warm-up project before we jump into the final project, which is a little bit bigger. Okay? And so I'd like to talk about some of the details with you on that. And some of that's going to require some interactivity on your part. So let's talk about this today, or let's talk about this first, and then we'll do what we're going to do for the final project, or not the next project after this. Okay. So really the reason I'm bringing him up here is because I kind of know his proportions a little bit better. I'm going to go ahead and sort of put him down here a little bit smaller, maybe over, move him over to here, get him started somewhere right about here, and actually let me move him further forward. And what I'm going to do before I do anything is I'm going to create a new drawing layer. Right. And we're going to call this sketch. Okay. So some of this will sort of go back to what we were talking about the first few days, but you'll remember that when I was sort of designing characters, I was using that sort of 3-mass system, right? So let me go ahead and just grab a brush here. And the way I was kind of doing it was sort of a general mass for the head. Let's get a better brush than that. Let's do brush 1, no, brush 2, what's that look like? That was better. So sort of a general mass shape for the head, probably a little small. One for the rib cage. Make that a little bit bigger. And then one for the hips. Now you remember that the three things that we talked about a lot was contrapposto, line of action, and silhouette. Right? So these three masses kind of help me with the first two, contrapposto and line of action. Right? And so for contrapposto, I just need to be able to see the angle of the shoulders, the angle of the hips, to be able to see that's a countering angle, and then I can get my line of action, which is this line through here, right? I'm going to go ahead and undo those things. Silhouette is really just what the limbs are doing, right? Now, if I were doing a different type of character, I might just use like stick figure limbs. I like Bucky because his limbs are actually just these sort of blocked out masses here, right? I can do those pretty quickly, right, to get the shape that I want out of his arms, right? And then kind of the same with his legs as well, right? And the only real issue with Bucky is he's got that thing going on, right? That's the only thing that makes him kind of different than those three masses, is he kind of has this extra snout mass, right? And that's actually kind of cool for me because that just helps me know which direction his head's pointing, right? Probably, there we go. Okay, so this is all I really need to be able to animate him. You'll see that I've kind of gotten him in the wrong proportions though. Let's go ahead and make him a bit bigger, probably something like that, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to animate Bucky using these three masses, right? And I know that we kind of talked about this in the frame-by-frame animation method, right? Is that get this information first because it's really easy to make changes to these drawings, right? But then we sort of transitioned into rigs, and we kind of dropped that idea. Anybody else needing the attendance sheet? That's the corner that makes it. So I'm going to keep using these. In fact, for the first part of my animation, I'm actually just going to I'm going to hide Bucky's rig entirely. Right? Let's hide the whole thing. What did I draw that on? Apparently, I was drawing that on. How did that disappear? Oh, is it a child of it? It is. There we go. Oh. What? Well, I'll fix it really quick. Apparently I drew that on something that was not that sketch layer. Control X. Put it on the sketch layer. Control V. I'm missing something. Yeah, anybody else say that? The attendance sheet? Okay. I'll just make a new one. New drawing. There we go. Bless. Really? I wonder if I have it mapped in behind the color card somehow. Oh. That makes no sense whatsoever. So apparently I had mapped that into the head composite. That's not what I wanted. I'll go ahead and put it into this composite. There we go. Now I can delete it. All right. Okay, so this is all I'm really needing to be able to animate Bucky, right? And I think that this is important because I know a lot of people, what they've been struggling with rigs is making the rig do what they want it to do without breaking the rig. And so it's been very hard to pose the rig in a way, like you'll start posing it and you'll start seeing where it's breaking, and so that limits how you pose it, right? And I want you to think the other way. I want you to think what pose is necessary for you to explain the animation that you're trying to explain, right? To illustrate the actions, illustrate the emotions that you are wanting us to see, right? And so I'm going to intentionally try to push Bucky into a couple of poses that are not very intuitive for a little rhino to be in, right? I feel like that mass needs to be a little bigger. I'm going to use this as sort of my reference sheet. So I will go out here, hit further, hit F5, right? And then this will be my ref. And I'll go ahead and do another drawing, and we'll call this will be sketch. And sketch is where I'm going to, I'll leave this up all the time so I can kind of see it and use it as a proportions guide, right? To do my sketch jump, or my sketch animation. The other thing I'm going to put on my reference layer is the thing that Bucky's going to be jumping over, which is just a little box here, right? So I just need this for reference. I can always do this later. So starting with sketch, I'm going to start doing the poses that I need for this jump, right? Over where I can see him a little bit better. So my first pose, I want him to feel kind of confident, right? Let me go ahead and lock some of these here. So confidence, I want to get like sort of a backwards swooping line of action. So I want to start with his chest, get that out there, push his pelvis back. And so really to get that line of action, again, I need to be thinking of like the way the angles and the hips and the chest are angled. And if they're angled like this, that means his torso is going to connect more on this side and kind of crinkle on this side, right? That's what's going to give him that feeling of confidence, right? Is that the chest is pushing out, the back is arcing, and that's going to give him a line of action like this, right? So for that, I can get his head back a little bit more, maybe point it forward a little bit, something like this. I'm going to sort of keep his legs sort of spread out just a little bit. A little. And then get a little bit of a bend in this arm. And this arm, I'm going to angle it like that. Okay. This is not good drawing, right? I'm not trying to do good drawing. I'm trying to figure out the motion. And I think that's one of the things that's really important to think about at this stage is your draftspersonship. Like we're not even in that. We've not gotten to that stage. Right? That is not even where your mind should be. Your mind should be, how do I make this thing seem to move in the correct way, right? So my next pose is I want to get an anticipation down here. Let's go ahead and F5 all the way through there. So I want to do a completely new pose on this, completely new. Go ahead and turn on my light box here where I can see it. And so to get that, I'm going to push this first mass, this hip mass, down lower, right? So we're going to push it down pretty low for that anticipation down, right? Something like this, right? That's going to cause his knees to bend, right? But it's not going to cause his knees to sort of change their location on the ground, right? Something like that. that. Now, earlier where we had that line of action going like this, if I want to make it feel like he's compressing, I'm going to do a reversal of that. Now, something to think about with squash and stretch. Stretching on a body is really just the distance between these three masses, right? If those three masses are really far apart, it feels like the character is sort of stretching. All of those parts in between those three masses are kind of softer, more malleable spots. And so those are the areas where you're going to see more of that squash and stretch. This might be how you would get the stretch of those three masses, where if you're wanting to squash them together, I'm going to bunch them all up, right? Like this going on, right? So that's kind of what I'm going to do with him here. I'm going to push those masses together, right? Scrunch them up. To get that line of action curling forward, I'm going to make sure his back is going in this direction. And I'm going to push his head down a little bit as well, right? Something like this. Now, my 2 cents, I think I can push that a little bit further. So I'm going to grab all of that and just see what happens if I push that down even more. Again, these aren't important drawings. These are drawings that nobody's ever going to see these except me. Well, and you. So to show that sort of anticipation, I'm going to pull his elbows back. Okay, so pull them back, something like this. And maybe even on this side, get the other one sort of poking out behind his back like that, right? So let me turn that off just so you can see that pose a little bit better. Right? So the difference between that. Right? So we're squashing Bucky up a little bit. And now if you look at his line of action, it's got this curve going this way, which is sort of the opposite of what we had before. Right? Now for him to sort of push off, I need a stretch pose to sort of counter this squash pose, right? So again, I bunched all of those three masses up together. I'm going to go ahead and sort of stretch them out a little bit. Right? So the head is going to be stretched out the most. Let's go up here, get a nice head pose. I'm going to get some distance between all three of them, right? And I want to get enough so it feels like he is actually stretching here, right? Get that nose out there. And then I want to get the hips. I want those to change pretty dramatically. I also wouldn't mind to see a little bit of an arc back in that line of action. So maybe grab all of these things, sort of scoot that forward. And the reason for that is now I get this, again, this reversal in that line of action on the curve, right? It's a stretch, but I want him to still feel like he's kind of making contact on the ground. Here's where I can kind of play around with this. If I want to pull one of those legs up, I can make this his contact on the ground, right? And you'll see that means I could probably push all of this stuff forward a little bit more like this, maybe even rotate him back a little bit more like that, right? And there we go. And then what I can do with that is I can pull this knee up a little bit to get sort of this other part of that. I want to get his arms kind of reaching for it a little bit, at least with that one. And then this other one, I want it to also be doing that. There we go. So to get that sort of backwards arcing line of action, something like this. So again, I'm thinking about the poses more than anything, right? Neutral, squash down, stretching out, right? And so I can go in here and do all sorts of different stuff to this pose if I need to. Talked about using like the envelope tool to warp some stuff. I got to be careful when I'm doing this not to change Bucky's proportions or anything, right? Because I'm trying to stay as close to on model as I can to him. But I can get some stuff that kind of warps a little bit more like this. Sort of arc him out. And just for planning purposes, if I wanted to go back to this reference and move this box, I could do that just so he's not hitting the box. There we go. So again, trying to keep him as on model as I can. Scale that snout down just a little bit. Okay. Now, there's always opportunities where I could try to reuse parts of poses. Right? So like maybe I want to reuse part of this. Just go ahead and copy that. Go out here, create a new pose, paste it, and sort of move that up in the air here. Maybe I would use the perspective tool, shear that a little bit, use the move tool, sort of scale him, squash him up a little bit, and then maybe have this leg sort of reaching a little bit more. In fact, I'll probably just redo those legs entirely. And the arms. So for the legs, I could have him, you know what, let's do this. Move that mass back to here. And then I'm still going to have that rear leg kind of catching up. Something like this. But his front leg is out here like really ready to go. And then his arms are going to start tucking back in, or at least one of them is. Maybe this other one I'll have reaching, right? I don't know. That one's a little muddy right now. I may mess with that in a bit. Okay. I'm going to kind of stop there just for a few minutes because what I'm doing here is I'm planning out the action. And hopefully by this point you forgot that there was a rig, right? The whole point of this is so I can step through and see, is Bucky moving correctly, right? Is he doing what I want him to do from here to here? He's got that stretch going on as he's squashing up a little bit after that. So I like how that's looking. And I can make changes to the animation and never even think about the rig, right? I never even worry about that stuff. Like that, right? So hopefully this is the reason that this method is something I'm losing track of my words here. So, yeah. So hopefully what this is doing is it's allowing you to completely forget about all of that rigging parts, right? And allow you to focus on getting the performance you want. Now, something I've not been hammering on too hard in here is getting reference. Reference is something that I strongly recommend you look at, even if you're animating something like a baby rhino jumping over a box on its hind legs, which I would never be able to get real reference of, right? But what I can get is a human being jumping over a box, right? I could try it a couple of different ways, like maybe that human being is not going to be proportioned anywhere near this, maybe that person isn't as heavy as I want my character to appear, right? But I can get the physics of that, and I can start using that to inform these poses that I'm creating, right? So the reason I'm doing this is because now I have all of that stuff solved. I mean, I really don't, but I have a portion of it, right? And it's very easy now for me to adjust stuff like timing. If I want to make this timing a little longer on that anticipation, I can. Now it's, right? And tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and do this kind of quickly just so I have something. I'll go ahead and copy this pose for the contact. Go out here to about here. Make a new one, paste that pose for the contact. I'm just going to reuse parts of this, even though this isn't how I would really want to animate this by any means. Oh, all wrong. And then I'll go ahead and still the squash as well. So this may be the extent that I would do my animation to, right? Just something so I can start figuring out those hardest poses for me. Again, I've not been thinking about the rig, and I almost guarantee you that I'm not going to be able to get some of these poses out of that rig, okay? What I can do, though, is I can get somewhere close. So let's go ahead and start posing a couple of them. Let's say this is where we want to be. I'm going to go ahead and unhide the Bucky rig here. I'm going to move my reference drawing sort of out of the way here. And then using my animation tools just for posing, I'm going to go through here and start posing Bucky to be kind of close to where I'm seeing my sketches, right? So I've got my placement of my character. Get him over here, closer to the beginning of that. Actually, let's look at the beginning of this. So the first one we kind of got to get is this proud pose, right? So let's try that. I'm going to go ahead and grab his chest control, sort of pull him out. Now what I'm wanting is that line of action again, right? And so it's been a little while since I've used this one, so I got to kind of play with it a little bit. So I want to push his hips forward a little bit. I don't really want to do that. Maybe I'll pull the whole body forward. And then for each of his legs, I'll pull those back just a little. That's kind of where I want them. I kind of underestimated how big his other leg was. Move that up just a little bit, still get it kind of a closer drawing. Right? Now I need to get him sort of leaning back to get that line of action. What happened to his arm? Why is that one in the front now? It should not be in the front. I messed that up somewhere, haven't I? I bet I did. Yep, right here. Left arm. There. Here we go. So to kind of get him in that pose, I need that line of action in his torso. So I'll pull him back. I'm going to use these to kind of almost create that line of action. A little bit of that. I want to get that bend in his elbow. You're already starting to see that I wasn't very close on the proportions, but that's one of the reasons I like using the rigs, is because that's something I'm not super strong at, is proportions. So get that there. His right arm, sort of rotate it back. I want to get that sort of on his side. So using this, something like this, sharper bend in it, something closer to him. And then this arm, I want it to kind of arc out a little bit, right? There we go. So now I'm getting kind of a little bit of a prouder pose than maybe I would have got just by default, right? By doing that sketch, I'm actually forcing myself to craft, to think about the pose, and animation is really just a series of poses, right? So this one was much easier for me to get just because I have some stuff to reference, right? Go ahead and hit F6 and get a keyframe on everything. And then we'll go on to our next pose, which is our squash pose, right? Again, I'll do F6 on that. And then this is where I will start pushing Bucky in those directions, right? I'm gonna bend him forward, push him down a lot. I gotta get his torso mass to be lower. So there's this torso peg. I really want his legs to not be connected to that. I would do that differently. So we'll move those legs back up. So now we're getting that anticipation down. Now in the legs, I do want to get that bending of the knee a little bit. So let's just hide this so we can see what is happening there. Oh, I've got his legs in the wrong order too, don't I? His right leg above his butt. There we go. There we go. So you can see that that's messing up. What I'm going to do, grab his right leg, move that down, and go ahead and get a body pose that makes sense with this. So one of the ways we can test this, foot's staying pretty close in the right spot. This other leg, not as much. Let's go ahead and move it. I want to be able to get that bend in it as well. Now, inevitably, you're going to get to a point to where you're not able to get the pose you want. Oh, what did I just hit? Go. Let's go ahead and get these arms where I want them. Right arm, move that up a little bit, rotate it, because I really want to get that bend in there. And so maybe this is it. I really want to be able to get his left arm doing the same thing, right? Right now it's that. I want to get this left arm way up here, kind of poking out behind. Actually, no, it's not too bad. So I'm not running into as many problems as I was, well, frankly, hoping I would. No. But I'm kind of running into some stuff with the torso here that looks kind of bad, right? So you see my character's like torso, I've bent it up just enough to really mess it up, right? And so that's why, that's one of the reasons that I'm showing you this, is because I can fight with this forever, right? I could go in here, grab this and tweak around with it, try to reduce some of this stuff I'm getting, right? But I may still just not be able to get the pose that I need out of that torso, right? And so in that case, what I'm actually going to do is just delete that keyframe on the, oh man. Is just sort of delete that keyframe on that deformation, or maybe just rework it. The other thing I could do is I could just create a completely new drawing on this character's torso. I could, there we go. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that torso keyframe. I'm going to try to see what happens if I just went in here and created a new drawing like right over top of that torso. Right? So I'm going to add a new drawing. Torso correct. I want to put that more like there. That works. And so what I can do is for right here, when I get to this pose of the torso, if I'm not happy with that, I can completely redraw a drawing here, right? I can go in here, maybe I would, copy cells there, paste cells there, not work. Set this drawing back to 0, where I no longer have a torso there. And right here, I can just go in and draw the torso I want, right? So I have a black layer here to draw. Oh, I got a lot of smoothing turned on that. Nope. Oh, I know what it's doing. It's because it's on my deformation. Go ahead and move this up here, right above torso peg. Torso correct. Let's see if this works. And make sure that that's going in front. And so now what I get is just once I get to that point where it starts to mess up, I can just swap out to that drawing. I feel like it needs to be a little wider there, a little bit more of a pudge. And I may start even swapping out just a touch earlier on this. So we'll see the torso correct. Maybe have it start more like right there. And that way the original torso, I can end it a little earlier. And I can extend that out for as long as I need to hold it, which is really till right about, I haven't created the next drawing yet, until we start going into that stretch pose, right? Okay. Is this making sense? What I'm trying to get at here? So effectively, sort of what I'm trying to say is the rig isn't something that has to have all of your answers ready. Right? Your rig is just a set of tools that you're going to use to kind of start solving whatever animation problems come up. But it's not going to have everything ready for it. So what I would say is to prioritize the way things are moving more than the way things are deforming. Because you can always fix the way things are deforming. You can do additional drawings, or maybe we get to a spot right in the middle of this where instead of having Bucky do, yeah, let's do that. Like, let's say we get up here to the spot where Bucky's up in the air, right? And instead of having him in this, or have this like floating pose up in the air right here, maybe I want him to just turn into a twirling like smear frame of a front flip, right? Maybe the pose for Bucky here is a front flip. That's the point where I would turn off all of those layers, right? Bucky would just disappear, and I would go to frame by frame animation right through that stretch as he starts coming back down toward the ground. So I guess the thing that I would encourage you to do is to plan this stuff out. Don't just start animating on the rigs. Start doing some sketching of the original way you would start blocking out your animation if you're going to do it frame by frame, even if you're using a rig. Okay, so let's chat a little bit. I want to kind of start moving toward where we're going to go for the final. Spring or fall break kind of puts a hiccup right in the middle of the semester. Spring break does too. Actually, spring break's a little worse. And there's several hiccups kind of in this semester because we also have Thanksgiving. We have we have several different days where school's out for a couple of days. And I want to kind of start getting us ramped up and a little bit more excited about the final project. But I feel like there's still a whole bunch of small things that like I could spend the rest of this class covering a whole bunch of tiny things, right? Like we looked at the last class period, the cameras, the different things in the node view. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a small mini project right before we go into the final. And just so, I've noticed this in the past, people lose motivation on projects that they are not personally interested in. I had an animation fundamentals class once where I gave them a project to animate casino items, right? Some dice and some chips, or like a roulette table or something like that, cards, and several people in the class kind of did not so well on that. And so when we were having a conversation about it, I was like, why is that? Like, why didn't you not? Why didn't this one go well? And they said, I'm just not interested in gambling. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. Some of the most successful projects I've ever had have been where I've said, I want you to work on something that you're excited about, right? So I think to kind of get us sort of ramped back up into the spirit of that, I want to take a week and let you work on a project that is completely of your own making, right? Completely of your own brainchild, right? To start that though, I want to help, because some people like that's also a daunting idea. You can do anything. Like, where do you start with anything, right? Are you going to animate a lizard exploding? Are you going to animate a giant mech battle? Are you going to animate a flower time lapse? Like, it could be anything, right? And that's the daunting part of that. And so I want to make this beneficial to you in terms of a lesson as well, or of learning new things. Right? So everybody, kind of with me just for a second here. I want to get you to do two things for me. I want you to take out a piece of paper, and I want you to tear it into two small squares, right? Just small enough for you to write a sentence on. Okay? I asked digital media students to get paper. Okay. And you're going to have to turn these in to me. So yes, you're going to be writing. So I'll tell you what. Okay, so once you have those two pieces of paper, I want you to write your name on both of them, just so I'll know who you are. Right? And I want you to write two things on there, one on each piece of paper. On one, and you could write good at the top of this one, write something in Toon Boom that you feel like, or in this class that you feel like you've done pretty well on, something you enjoyed, something you feel like went well when you tried to do it. Was it the rigging? Was it frame-by-frame animation? Was it character design? Was it like anything that you think that you are doing relatively well at, or particularly well, something you're proud of your abilities of and enjoyed, right? And make sure you write good at the top of that one so I know which one this is, because you may see where I'm going with this.
You could write your names on these?
Mm-hmm.
One thing?
Huh?
One thing?
One thing, yeah. I'll give y'all a couple minutes to kind of be thinking about these if you want to. Now, so I'll give you a few more minutes, but for those of you who are kind of sort of ready to go on that one, on the other piece of paper, write bad or something so I know which one. Write something that you feel like you're struggling with, something that you are fighting with or feel like is not something you have a strong grasp of, right? So maybe like for one of you, maybe for some of you, you're like, I'm really good at the rigging part, I'm really bad at the frame-by-frame part, right? Maybe some of you are like, I don't understand deformers, right? Like deformers are something I'm still fighting with. Maybe it's a completely like staying on model in your frame by frame. Maybe it's color. Like I am particularly bad at color theory and like doing anything that looks like I had an actual plan when it came to color, right? Maybe it's the inking work, the line work, right? Anything that you feel like you are struggling with, you can be as broad or as detailed as you want to be. You're bad at drawing eyes, right? You're bad at drawing hands. Anything you want. Okay. How many of you need a minute or two still yet? Still thinking?
You said just one thing for both.
Yep. One thing you feel like you're good at, one thing you feel like you're struggling at. Or you can also say enjoy or don't enjoy. Right? Okay.
So if we wrote more than one thing, we would select
Well, that you're bad at or that you're good at, or both. I would say pick. No, you can leave them. I guess you can leave them both on there if you want to, but I think I would advise you to kind of focus on one, just because we only have a week. Okay, so as you're done with those, I will take them up because what you've just written down is your assignment, right? Yeah. What I want you to do is for the next week, I want you to work on a project that includes both of those. Okay? Actually, I think that this is a happier project than it was this morning. I was chatting with Katie and telling her, I had this idea for this, and she mentioned like, well, that sounds like a terrible week if I'm only working on the thing I suck at, right? And that made a great point to me, like, yeah, I want you to get excited about this. So what I want to see from you is what I'm hoping this will happen is you're going to take that thing you feel like you're really good at, and that's going to make you want to run with it, right? Like if you feel like you're really good at doing frame-by-frame animation, here is a free pass to work for a week on a frame-by-frame animation, right? But let's say the thing you struggle with is drawing hands. I would encourage that frame-by-frame animation to be of a character that has 4 hands, right? Like something that is going to cause you to have to fight with that thing you are struggling with and get better at it. To add a small caveat to this, after you turn this in, I'm going to sort of pair you up at randomly, and I want you to teach someone that thing you're bad at. Right? I want you to get good enough at this to show it to somebody else. Right? I know this is feeling a little stressful, so if you need to revise that thing you're bad at just a little bit, like if you went a little too big, like I want to be able to fully rig 3D characters that can rotate in full 3D space. Or something like that. Yeah, okay, back off just a little bit. Maybe figure out deformers better, right? Or learn how to use the node editor a bit better, right? And so this is going to take a little bit of research on your part. I am going to be here through all of this, so I will help you if there's things you're fighting with. If you're like, I can't figure out this deformer, I can sit down with you on it. I want you to have a week of doing 2 things, learning and having fun, right? Because those are the 2 things that this should be for you, right? This should be something you have fun with. To take some stress off of it, after I have those pieces of paper, if the project you turn in has addressed both of the things that are on that piece of paper, you get a 100. It's a project grade of a 100. I want there to be no stress at all on this. I want you to tackle this project as something you really want to do, right? And I think part of that should be you really want to get better at something that you're struggling with, or something that you're not good at right now. Okay? Anybody want to volunteer some of theirs just so we can hear some examples? Let's hear them. What's the good one?
For good?
For both.
Okay, for bad, I don't like curves.
Don't like curves. Oh, that's a good one. What's the good one?
Everything else.
So you're going to do everything else, but you're going to just I would say circle one you really like. Drawing. So you're going to be doing some drawings so they're going to do some strong drawings that you are animating with keyframes so you can work on the curves or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else want to volunteer theirs? Oh yeah.
I said for good, rigging the characters and like organizing the node view. And then for my bad, animating, finding motivation to animate, like getting the realistic motion and like keeping the frame by frame stuff in proportion. That stuff makes me want to cry just thinking about it.
Cry. Like, I don't want any of my classes to make anyone cry. No, I think that's good. So I think that there's an interesting part of that, which is motivation, right? And that's one of the things that's really hard in anything that you do is writers go through this a lot. They call it writer's block, but writer's block isn't really I don't think it's really a thing. Writer's block is that you haven't trained that ability to write when you're not excited about it, right? The guy who wrote, Peter Beagle, I think is his name, wrote the Last Unicorn. He said, if the muse doesn't show up, get started without her, right? And that's, I think, the way to look at this. Like, that motivation is very difficult sometimes. There will be days you show up to work and you're like, I don't want to do this today, right? If that happens consecutively for months and months at a time, then maybe there's an issue. Maybe you're kind of focusing in the wrong area, or you need to sort of adjust your goals or what it is you want to do, right? But if that's just happening for a day or two, it may be that, like, you kind of have to power through it, right? You sit down and you start doing it anyway, and it starts getting fun again, right? Or hopefully it starts getting fun again. The thing for me with stuff not feeling, not being able to get motivated about a piece is usually that sense of a positive feedback loop, right? We get into this stuff because we do something, we look at it, I like how it looks, it makes me feel good, so I want to do more of it, right? It's got this addictive cycle. If what you're doing is not giving you that positive feedback loop, sometimes it's just you need to find ways of doing it in a different pattern or a different sequence that you get that feedback loop more, right? So like, if the thing that gives you the positive feedback loop is seeing it move correctly, not necessarily the whole thing, but just seeing like a section of it that feels right, then work on 7 frames of animation at a time, right? And just get those 7 frames looking excellent. And then that gives you that feedback loop and makes you go, oh, cool, I like this, I'm enjoying this. Anybody want to volunteer some of their others?
Yeah, I said reading and animating is really animated, and then for the thing I really want to put better at is character design. A lot of my character design feel the same.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Well, that's cool. So that's another, I will take you back off of Charlie's here, because if one of the things you're feeling like you're bad at is Toon Boom in general, or maybe you're just feeling like you feel too locked into certain software packages, or you want to be more versatile, use this project as a chance to try out some other software packages, right? Maybe you want to do some 2D animation in Blender. Blender has a new 2D animation thing in it. You could spend a little bit of time trying to do some of that. Do the frame-by-frame animation in Blender and see what you get out of that. or hop over to Adobe Animate. There are still lots of studios that are using it. So, anybody else want to volunteer some? I'll not make it, but I do want those copies of the paper. What I would say is you need to remember them too, so you may need to take a picture of them or write them down again for yourself, so you remember what it is you're focusing on. How I'm going to grade this is I'm going to watch the animation, and then I'm going to look at those 2 pieces of paper and be like, yep, they addressed both of those, and then I'm going to type in 100 and hit submit on the grade, right? Because this is not something you should be sweating the grade on. This is something you should be, like, this should be a intrinsic motivation, right? It shouldn't be you fearing a punishment or searching for a reward. This should be about getting better and about enjoying this, right? So the thing I would say is eventually we have to have an end date for this. My thought, although I will leave this up to you all if you want to adjust this a little bit, my thought was a week from today. That's a week of, that's basically the rest of this class, Friday's class, Monday's class, we look at what you have, right? How does that sound? All right, and again, this is a project grade, so I honestly, like, I don't know that anybody in this class is doing poorly, so I don't think the grade should really be that big of an issue anyway. Okay, whenever you're ready, I'll take them up. And I will say, I know that this maybe helped you narrow it down because you have to fit it into those 2 categories. You may still be having issues coming up with ideas. Anybody in that boat? Yeah. I'm really good at coming up with ideas. So that is a thing that is a thing to that you can practice as well. So if I missed anybody, just this is the first project I've taken up in years that actually involved a physical thing. And it involved paper that I'm going to lose. Okay. Cool, it's a whole sheet. I can wrap the other ones in the whole sheet. Okay. I have a stapler downstairs. I'm going to tuck them into my iPad where I keep everything that's important to me, including all of the X23 comics. So, coming up with ideas. If you're still kind of in a conundrum, right? There's a couple of things I would say. One is to kind of veer away from the familiar, right? Veer away from doing the things that you've done before, right? One is because you're just going to hit familiar territory in terms of challenges there. Anita DeAngelis, she's actually the woman who is responsible for this giant building in our front yard. She's the one who kind of got the whole movement going to get that built. She was my figure drawing teacher when I was here, and she used to walk around saying, walk around the class while we're drawing. She would say, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten, right? So if you want a challenge, try something way outside of your comfort zone, right? If you are always doing cartoony characters, try something realistic, right? Try to do as close to realism in your animation as possible, right? If you're always doing characters that have like very low levels of exaggeration, like try pushing it like huge, like try to break it. The other thing I will say about coming up with ideas is it's a process too, right? And I think the best way to do that, if you're ever in a brainstorming session, which I'm more than happy to do those with you, or if there's more than one, if there's multiple people in here having issues coming up with ideas, we can sit down on Friday and we can do a brainstorming session as a group. The way brainstorming sessions work is there are no bad ideas, right? And that is the hardest thing ever. But once you get past that, and you can say purple turtle poop or whatever, right? Like, that is not a bad idea because somebody just heard purple turtle, and like that clicks something else, and that leads to another idea, and that leads to another idea. The whole trick to brainstorming is to not let anything be off the table, right? If you throw everything out there, some of those words will spark a part of your brain that wasn't getting triggered, right? The way synapses work is you associate familiar things with things that you've associated with them before, right? If I think of Apple, my brain is always going to go to my phone or that tree that was in my front yard, right? Like, or was it pink lady apples? Those are really crispy ones that are huge and sweet, delicious. It's never going to go to like Spain or something like that, right? Because I haven't tied that synapse together. But if you have a bunch of stuff on a page and you see apple and Spain, and you're like, oh, what about some sort of like apple in the Spanish Inquisition apple or something? You can start pulling stuff together that has no connection for any other reason, right? And for me, every time I've ever had trouble coming up with ideas, it's because my brain goes to the same spot, and I have to find triggers to make it go somewhere else. There are random writing prompt generators out there. There are random idea generators. Try running through some of those and starting to see what comes up, right? Is it a submarine that is filled with penguins, right? That one's actually been done. But so anything that you can come up with is really about trying to get your brain to go somewhere that it hasn't gone before, or that it doesn't go easily. Right? So I'll be around in my office in the mornings if you want to sit down. I'll also be around after class here if you want me to help you sort of toss out some ideas. Or if you're just like, Marlo, I don't want to come up with an idea, just tell me something to do. Like, I'm cool with that. I'll toss out stuff all day long. Okay. I guess I had somewhere else I was going to go with that. Any questions? Okay, I'm gonna tell you one more thing, okay? All right, pretty much if you're doing this project and you paid attention to like what I've said, you're gonna address those two things, right? This can be the most horrible thing ever, and you'll still pass it, right? I know you don't hear that in class that often. But I think you should give yourself permission to make stuff that sucks, right? Because not everything has to turn into your portfolio piece. Like, it is absolutely fine to start a project saying, I am going to throw this one away, right? This one is something that the only thing I get out of it is experience and knowledge, right? I have tons of those. And whether you realize it or not, you do too, right? All the stuff that you were proud of your freshman year, like you've made better stuff than that already, right? And even though like you're proud of them then, and they're probably still pretty good, like you're not going to put those in your demo reel, right? You're going to put the stuff that's even better in your demo reel. You want to hear something kind of crazy and sad? Nothing I did for my bachelor's degree or my master's degree is currently in my demo reel. Everything that I have in my demo reel has been stuff I've done in the last like 7 to 10 years, right? And someday yours is going to be the same way. The thing that you are most proud of right now will someday be your worst piece because everything you make will be better, right? And so when you think of it that way, everything you do here is just hopefully getting you closer to being better at this, right? Just moving you further down the line. So, I want to take all of the stress off of this so you can dive in and do whatever the hell you want on this project, right? anything you want to do, well, like within within reason in terms of taste and appropriateness. Let's put it that way. Because we're going to watch these on a screen, and I don't want to blush. So all of that is open. Like if you have a passion project, if you've got something you've always wanted to make, if you have something that you're like, I want to do a bad like fart joke animation. Whatever you want to do, this is yours to do, right? My hope is that when this is all over, when this project is over, you will leave it feeling a little like refreshed and energized and hyped about animation, and that's how we will go into the final, right? We will jump into that final with that exuberance and energy. Questions?
Do you have audio of any kind
You can do it entirely a dance video, like it could be an entire dance animation, it can be a lip sync, it can be anything you want to do. Yes. Yes. Other ideas, questions, comments? Dave?
Do we need to have like a discernible like main character?
No, actually, if like one of the reasons I did this is actually replacing what was going to be that environment animation that I was doing with the trees and the cave and everything. I was going to have us do some variation of that. If what you want to do is literally you want to animate explosions, heck yeah! Like I'd love to see like a bunch of explosions. There's no real time limit on this either. Although I will say like it's really hard to watch an animation that's under like 4 or 5 seconds. Like it almost goes by so fast you don't get to watch it. So I would say just in that, like, even if it is, if you do something that's like 4 seconds of animation, that's not going to really ding you grade-wise. But what I would say is like, do something that gives you. If it is kind of short, let's see it on a loop a few times so we can catch it right when we watch it. Other questions, comments? Ooh, now I'm excited about seeing some explosions. Anybody wanting to do explosions? Oh, right. That is, in case you were needing to change your answer on this piece of paper, that's a really strong exercise in straight ahead animation. So instead of pose to pose, it's almost entirely straight ahead. Any of these little things that you're like, oh, that's cool, but I already had a different idea. Well, see if you can implement some of it in there. Like just, this is your scratch paper to learn from. Yes.
Is an explosion something you can rig?
An explosion, something you can rig.
Like with that rotiformer where you can like widen it.
You could probably do some. I wouldn't say you could rig it. You could use tools within Harmony to manipulate images in order to get some kind of stuff. Like you could have a sequence of like a frame-by-frame sequence of a cloud puff that goes from small to big, and like frame-by-frame, like 15 frames of that, and you could have layers upon layers of that you were animating like at different rates and scaling them and stuff like that. So, other questions, comments? How many of you are intimidated by this project? Okay. That was more than I was hoping. How many of you are excited about this project? Okay. All right. So, if you're intimidated by it, is it because it can be anything? Is that the intimidating part?
Well, it's also because of the thing we said we had to do the thing that we're bad at.
Oh yeah, that's the cool part. It's not that you have to like knock that out of the park. You just have to address it, right? Like if you spend an hour working on something you're bad at the end of that hour, you will be slightly less bad at it, and that's all I'm really aiming for, right? Is you being slightly less bad at it. I'm not expecting you to like come out the other side being like, incredible at that. I'm just hoping that you'll progress a little bit in whatever that is you struggle with. Okay. Well, done teaching now. So I'll hang around class. Actually, I have to hop out probably about 10 minutes early. I have to hop out about 4:35. But otherwise, the class is yours. Let me go and stop this video. I'll upload it to YouTube. I don't know if there is anything useful in it, but you are more than welcome to watch it again if you'd like. So, bye.